Alright, we are on part 10 now, evaluating Druid spells in Arena. Let's get right to it. So Druids have a very powerful epic slot, probably the strongest epic slot of any other class because of Ancient of War, Ancient of Lore, which are both insanely good cards. So they have very powerful late game as well, because of that slot as well. They also have two different kinds of primary board clear and lots of removal spells. Their hero power does affect the board. There's a typo right there. And their late game is really good with cards like Ironbark Protector. However, they're weak to hard removal, and they struggle in the early game, as well as having some tempo problems. Let's get right into it. Innervate. Gain 2 mana crystals this turn only. This card is a top tier pick in constructed play because it allows you to reliably play bigger stuff than your mana crystals technically allow for. And Druid's biggest strength in constructed play is being able to manipulate mana and play things that are ridiculously strong. In Arena, playing Innervate is not as good. Innervate is probably an average pick, but the problem with Innervate, and I've experienced this a lot actually because I play a lot of Druid, is it generates card disadvantage that's very noticeable very quickly. And what I mean by this is, say you want to play your Sunwalker or something on turn 4 and you Innervate it out. All of a sudden you're using 2 cards to play something, or let's say you Innervate out like a Yeti or a Senjin Shieldmaster, and you play that card, and then your card gets killed, and all of a sudden your opponent has 6 cards in hand and you have 2, and you're already feeling super behind in the sense that, oh crap, I gotta hurry up and I gotta quickly do this and whatever. And because Innervate is usually, like, the card disadvantage that Innervate generates is generally negated in constructed play by the fact that you have a lot of different card draw mechanisms that you can't reliably get when you play Arena. So with that being said, I think Innervate is actually below average. I think it's a 4 out of 10. Moonfire, deal 1 damage for no mana. This doesn't justify a slot in your deck because it only deals 1 damage. It's nice that it costs 0. But not worth a slot in your deck. Pretty simple, basic card that's not very good. Claw, give your hero +2 attack this turn and +2 armor. So this allows your hero to 1 mana deal 2 damage basically. But you also have to take damage and then you restore 2 health. So this card is I'll evaluate it as a 1 mana deal 2 damage, and for that reason, it's just like Holy Smite and just like Arcane Shot. It's good if you got 1 of them. It's okay if you have 2 of them. It's bad if you have more of them. Same sort of deal. This card's a 6 or a 7. Naturalize. Destroy a minion. Your opponent draws 2 cards. Drawing 2 cards is pretty rough. So think about it this way: your opponent gets to draw 2 cards. That's 3 mana. That they don't have to pay for. So this card essentially costs 4. And a 4 mana destroy a minion is okay. It's hard removal, that's not too bad. Giving your opponent cards is, I would say that I would rather have it be a 4 mana destroy minion as opposed to a 1 mana destroy minion your opponent draws 2 cards, even though they're worth about the same in terms of actual value between the 2 of them. But Naturalize is okay. It can be picked up sometimes. I'll give it a 4. Savagery. Deal damage equal to your hero's attack to a minion. This card is fucking terrible because you don't have weapons when you play Druid. So you can't reliably have heroes attack to be dealing to minions. And the only time it's going to be more than 1 is if you play Bite or Claw, which means this card is entirely dependent on other cards that aren't even top tier as is. So with that being said, Savagery is a 1. I've never seen this card be played, actually, ever. And I've played a lot of Hearthstone. I've never seen anyone ever play Savagery in Arena or in Constructed. I would laugh so hard if I actually get wrecked by a 1 one day. And I look forward to that day, actually, because it's just, this card is never used, ever. Alright, let's keep moving. Mark of the Wild, give a minion taunt and +2/+2. We talked about this a little bit with Demon Fire, I believe is what it's called. The deal 2 damage or give a friendly demon +2/+2. Giving a buff card, giving a minion a buff for +2 attack and 2 health is pretty good. However, it is dependent on the stuff that you're playing not being destroyed immediately, and generally you play it, you let the minion snooze for the turn that it takes to get ready, your opponent plays whatever, then you buff it with Mark of the Wild. You don't want to use Mark of the Wild right away, because it allows your opponent to see the trick that you have up your sleeve. You want to be able to buff it so that your opponent doesn't anticipate the extra value that you're going to get out of the card. And the value can be negated if you play it ahead of time and show your hand. So with that being said, this card is entirely dependent on other cards to be good. But when it's actually played, it is pretty good. So it's a high 5, low 6 kind of deal. Wild Growth, gain an empty mana crystal. This is another top tier pick in constructed play because you want to be manipulating mana as fast as possible. This is a card that is either gain an empty mana crystal or 2 mana draw a card. And 2 mana draw a card isn't good. And getting an empty mana crystal, this is another one of the cards just like Innervate that generates card disadvantage for you. There will be times that it is very useful, but there are times that also you just feel like you don't have enough things in hand and the extra mana crystal isn't helping you at all. So Wild Growth is another below average pick in Arena. I'd give it a 4 or a 5. Power of the Wild. This is a top tier pick in Arena because you have 2 options that are both really good. You give your minions +1/+1 if you have a strong board and you draw it late in the game, or you could summon a 3/2 and 2 mana 3/2 is fine. And also it has some potential beast synergy with some of the other beast cards that Druids have, which is fine. So this card is an 8 or a 9, top tier. Wrath. Deal 3 damage to a minion or deal 1 damage and draw a card. So dealing 1 damage and drawing a card is 1.5 mana, and dealing 1 damage is 0.66 mana. So the card is either a 2 mana, deal 3 damage, your standard cookie cutter, good stats, or 2.13 repeating worth of mana because you're drawing a card and dealing 1 damage. And you have the option of doing either or depending on what is best for the situation. So I think you could see that both options are really, really good, and both options are top tier. So Wrath is a really good card. This is another 8 or a 9. Healing Touch, restore 8 health. This card, if you use it on yourself, like you use it on your face, this card is really bad because it only stalls for a turn and does actually nothing. If you use it on a minion, and there are some options for Druids to use their Healing Touch on big stuff, on their Ironbark Protectors, on their Boulder Fist Ogres, on their whatever. There will be instances in which this card is really good. I just got a free Reese's Peanut Butter Cup from my grandfather. But yeah, Healing Touch is generally not very good because you need a large cost minion, like a large minion that has to be damaged to really low health so that you can play this card, and that's a pretty unlikely circumstance. So I'd say this card's a 2 or a 3, pretty bad. Mark of Nature, give a minion +4 attack or give a minion +4 health and taunt. Unlike Mark of the Wild, the distribution is really bad. Having a card that's, let's say you have a Bloodfin Raptor, and you either have the option to make it a 7/4, or sorry, a 7/2, or you have the option of making it a 3/6. with Taunt. And you could see that one of those options is superior in terms of stats and distribution. I don't know. How am I trying? I'm trying to phrase this in the sense that Mark of Nature forces you into an awkward sense of distribution and doesn't do enough for 3 mana, in my opinion. There will be times that it's okay. It's an average pick. I'll say it's a 5. But it's not like better than Mark of the Wild. Because this card is going to be exclusively used mostly for trading up into bigger creatures, which means it's dependent on already having a board and depending on having that 4 attack be useful, and sometimes only 2 attack is needed, and then you just kind of wasted 2 attack. So that's the way it kind of works. Savagery, give your characters +2 attack this turn. This is basically a board clear card that's dependent on you having things on the board to help with board clear. So Savagery is below average. I'll give it a 5. It's really dependent on you having a board, and otherwise it's 3 mana, deal 2 damage with your hero's face, which is really bad. In Constructed, you'll see sometimes people needing to use Savagery to start clearing the board, just using it only for their hero, and that's kind of a desperate situation. That's really bad. Poison Seeds, destroy all minions and summon 2/2 treants to replace them. This is a really hard card to evaluate because do you want to destroy your own minions? Do you want to destroy your enemy minions? What if your opponent's minions have Death Rattle? What's the plan then? So Poison Seeds it's technically a removal card, but your opponent will still have a pretty strong board. If they already have a strong board, they'll still have a pretty strong board after Poison Seeds is played. And so for that reason, I think that Poison Seeds is not a top tier pick. Also, it costs 4 mana, which is pretty costly, especially considering your opponent may still have a stronger board than you afterwards and still have an advantage. But you could still maybe make it work with Starfall, or something of the like. But yeah, I'm feeling the solid probably a 3 or a 4 on this card. Soul of the Forest, give your minions Death Rattle, summon a 2/2 treant. You need, thinking about it in the sense of, it costs 4 mana. So you need 2 to 3 minions on the board that become treants for your Soul of the Forest to become valuable in terms of the mana you spent to cast it. And that's actually pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult to reliably get 2 to 3 minions on the board so that you can use your Soul of the Forest. But on the bright side, you can still use your Soul of the Forest even if your minions are asleep or warming up. So there are some potential options there. I think it's better than Poison Seeds because it allows your board to all of a sudden become resistant to Area of Effect, unlike Poison Seeds. But I think that Soul of the Forest is still a pretty poor pick overall. This is probably another 3 or a 4. Swipe, this is your primary board clear card, so you need it. 4 mana, deal 4 damage is okay. Dealing 1 damage to all of their enemies is pretty good. So Swipe is probably an 8. I wouldn't give it a 10 because it's not like the best board clear card that they have, or it's not the best board clear card that's been printed, but it's still pretty good. Bite, to give your hero +4 attack and +4 armor. This is saying 4 mana, deal 4 damage, restore 4 health, and take whatever damage for the attack. This is, so just like Claw, I'll say that this is 4 mana, deal 4 damage. And 4 mana, deal 4 damage is much worse than something like Claw, which is 1 mana, deal 2 damage. It's still average, it still can work, but it's still not great. Bite is a 5. Nourish, gain 2 mana crystals. You're never going to use it for gaining 2 mana crystals, or draw 3 cards. So, would you have a card that costs slightly above the curve, costs 5 mana when you only want it to cost 4.5, to draw 3 cards, and it does nothing else? This is the same problem that Arcane Intellect has, where you spend a lot of money this turn to gain more cards, but you spent so much mana this turn that you're giving up your tempo and you're giving up your board presence to draw into hopefully better stuff. And for that reason, Nourish is another average pick. It's probably a 5. Starfall, choose one, deal 5 damage to a minion or deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. This is either another board clear card or a special remove one large threat. And it's good in the sense that it has the option, but each option isn't top tier. It's still board clear, it's still a comeback mechanism, it's still a card that can be used quite effectively. So Starfall gets a high rating, probably a 6 or a 7. But it's not prime removal, it's pretty costly. It's like, this is like a strictly worse Holy Nova. Think about it in the sense that dealing 2 damage to all enemy minions as opposed to dealing 2 damage to all enemy characters plus healing all your own characters for the same cost in mana. So like Holy Nova is considerably better than Starfall is, but that's the way it is. Alright, Starfire, deal 5 damage, draw a card. This card is acceptable, because even though 4.5 mana, deal 5 damage is way below the number you're looking for, it's still a lot of damage composed into one card, and it cycles. And it allows your cards to keep, allows you to keep dealing with your opponent's stuff until you get into that late game stage where Druids are strongest. So yeah, recycle. Shuffle an enemy minion into your opponent's deck. So this is simply saying, 6 mana. Take a minion that your opponent has played, and delay its playing for a while, an indefinite while. Think about Naturalize as the 4 mana destroy a minion because of the draw 2 cards aspect. 4 mana destroy a minion, or 6 mana delay a minion's playing until later. If you think about it that way, Naturalize is like a better pick by tenfold, and it is. Recycle is a really bad card. I'd say it's a 2. Dark Whisper, summon 5 wisps or give a minion +5/5 and taunt. Just like we compared Mark of the Wild to Demon Fire, we could compare this to Demon Heart, except this is worse. It costs more mana, and it has the same amount of stats. And summoning 5 wisps is terrible. 6 mana, summon 5 1/1s. Why would you ever do that? Like, cool, we have wisps. That's kind of fun, but there's no synergy with any of the beasts. There's no synergy with any other cards, because wisp doesn't have any card text or any style. So any class, race it belongs to, I should say, like beast or demon or whatever. So Dark Whispers is another card that's below average. You can use the +5/5 and taunt to generate some advantage, but you can't heal it up consistently like you could if you gave +5/5 to a priest. Force of Nature. This is 6 mana, deal 6 damage. Spread out over 2 treants, because you're not going to reliably draft Force of Nature Savage Roar in Arena. There will be times where you can get it, and maybe that'll be good. But 6 mana, 6 damage. 6 mana, deal 6 damage is pretty bad, so I wouldn't pick up Force of Nature most of the time. This is probably a 3 or a 4. And finally, Tree of Life. Restore all characters to full health. Tree of Life is terrible in Arena. The only time that Tree of Life saw any play in like constructed play as well is the Fatigue Druid that uses the Naturalizes and the Grove Tenders to give your opponent the extra cards so that you can make them go into fatigue faster, and it comes with lots of removal and lots of abilities to deal with your opponent's minions. And then, once you get really low health, you use Tree of Life so that you go back to full health, and your opponent, you probably didn't hit your opponent a lot anyway, so it's not a big worry that they go up to full health either. And then you slowly fatigue them to death. That's how you would play Fatigue Druid. Obviously, you're not going to do that in Arena, and restoring yourself to full health probably doesn't matter at all for Tree of Life. So Tree of Life is terrible. It's like a 1. And now that we've talked about all the Druid spells, you can kind of see that a lot of Druid spells are pretty weak. Druids are really relying on the fact that they have really strong minions. There are a couple really good spells as well, and multiple abilities to board clear, and lots of removal. To stall until the late game, where they can get their Ironbark Protectors out, where they can get their Ancient of Lowers and their Ancient of Wars out. It's still a strong class in Arena, but it's not based on really spells. So hopefully you could see that throughout the course of this video. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to stay tuned for the next part, and I hope you enjoyed. So thanks for watching.